videoing for the National Library. All our lectures, most of our lectures are videoed for the National Library. And we are recording Eli Eyal. You remember Eyal, the board member of the Board Science Foundation?
Yes.
He is the editor-in-chief of Kivunim Chadashim, which is a major...
Okay, that's fine. I mean, there's nothing secret.
Good, that's good. Welcome to everybody. Special welcome to our guest of today, Carole Solomon, the chairperson of the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency. You know, looking up to Dan Elazar, founder of the center, its first president and chairman. He was really the leading figure in community studies, Jewish community studies in the world. And I must say we have to some extent neglected the field since he passed away, and I'd very much like to re-enter this field in another way than only through our work on anti-Semitism and post-Holocaust. So it's a really great pleasure that we have had in the past few years occasionally lectures on community issues. I really feel that there is a tremendous problem in Israel, that there is not a community here which has a genuine organized interest in the diaspora. I have always the feeling that the money from abroad is considered here some kind of an oil well. Once you have discovered it and done the exploration, it keeps coming up. We know nothing about what goes on about it, the struggles in the community, in the American community. Money goes domestically, money goes to Israel, the money goes to the joint for other countries. Really, the Israeli media don't tell us anything about it. Before I ask Carole to speak, just announcement for those of us who come to the Berman lectures. The next Berman lecture is on the 14th, Sunday the 14th of March. I'm very glad that I finally have found somebody who knows anti-Semitism in Greece. Greece, one of the most problematic countries in Europe. You see there in the press things and in the politics mainstream expressions of extreme verbal anti-Semitism. It's very difficult to find somebody who... Pardon? 14th March. And thereafter I've just, we will have the worldwide premiere of Willy Lindwer, Emmy Award-winning director, on his new movie on how the Dutch collaborated with the Nazis, and wasn't only the work, the destruction of the Dutch community was not only the work of the Nazis, but the Dutch provided major services to that. That's also the movie which will be shown here on television, national television, on Holocaust, on Yom HaShoah. And finally, for the French lectures, we have on the 16th of March, Dr. Simcha Epstein on the battle between the intellectuals in France about Israel, those who attack and those who reply. I'll now not let you wait longer. Carole will speak to us about the issues around American fundraising for Israel. She has been active in this in many capacities. As head of the chairman of Judea campaigns in the United Jewish communities, in the Philadelphia communities. So please, Carole.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it on? Yeah. There is also a very deep connection with Dr. Elazar, not only his work, which I'm familiar with over a long period of time because of my involvement in the Philadelphia community before moving to New York, but I've read over the years position papers that he also wrote not just about the connection between the communities and Israel, but even more specifically on the Jewish agency, a prophet in his time. Actually, I'm looking at the back at Howard Weisband. I think you were Secretary General when these papers were circulated. So I'm one of these few people that reads everything that comes in front of me, and I did read that, and I remember. The philanthropic trends and the communal attitudes is a subject that, having spent my life involved in the local and then the national and then the international communities, it's sort of like asking an alcoholic to discuss drinking. It's a subject that engages me constantly, and I feel very comfortable with it. The concentration will really be between Israel and North America, more on North America, but just for informational purposes, I thought I would take a sort of a fast glance around the world, because it creates kind of a situational analysis in which you can really place Israel and the North American communities, I think, in better perspective. 80% of the world's Jewish population is in Israel and the U.S. And there are 11 countries in the rest of the world that have Jewish communities with a population of 50,000 or more. Two very interesting combinations, but both Australia and Germany have growing Jewish communities at the moment. The South African community is declining, and Argentina and France would really be classified as unstable. Really, the potential for movement in either direction. The United Kingdom, just as a fact, the largest amount of philanthropic dollars that are dispersed within the Jewish community in the UK goes to local British causes. And on an age cohort of 45-year-olds and younger, dollars going to Israel, that has the lowest priority. That, by the way, is a trend line almost everywhere. There's the older, more traditional, and not necessarily traditional just in the religious sense, but the older, more traditional donor is the bread and butter, the classic supporter of Israel. As you start to go down from the older donor down to a younger donor, that's where there's a very substantial shift in attitude. The anti-Semitism in Europe, Dr. Gerstenfeld just alluded to that. We don't know how that may or may not change the attitude of this, quote, younger generation. In 2003, half of the incidents of anti-Semitism worldwide occurred in France. Again, so it's hard to measure what the impact may be on a younger generation that may all of a sudden, from the outside, be forced to confront who they are and how they will or will not connect to the community. The Keren HaYesod countries, which are all of the countries in the world outside of Israel and the United States, in terms of attitude, have much closer ties to Israel. They visit more often. There's more of a potential that they have family and friends who live in Israel, and their ties are really deeper. Also, which may or may not be a correlation, their population in day schools, the attendance in Jewish day schools, are also higher in the Keren HaYesod countries. That may also be an indicator of forging stronger links. I'm going to do a very brief scan of Israel because what's happening here in the third sector plays into what's happening to some extent in the U.S. There's been an explosion in growth of amutot here. Currently, 27,000 amutot are active, many of whom, as Dr. Gerstenfeld characterized the oil well, I would say the ATM machine that is the view of the North American community. Even many of them who receive funds from the national organizations are coming on a daily basis to communities in the States, to individual donors, which tends to really muddy the water. It could be a whole other lecture, by the way, as to whether this growth, and I think it's very commendable in terms of Israel, that there has been an explosion of growth in the third sector, but I believe one needs to question how strategic is it. You could take almost any thematical area, elderly, children at risk, vulnerable populations, Ethiopian integration, and there is a plethora of amutot in all of these areas, many of whom don't know the existence of the other, each of whom make a particular case for their particular orientation towards the larger problem. And at the end of the day, when you need someone to either coalesce them or to be a serious change agent, if these problems are going to be addressed, I think you have to ask yourself, if 27,000 amutot with a catch-all of programs, and each having their own, whether even if it's infinitesimal infrastructure, is this cost effective? Is this really strategic? The Bank of Israel, and this are statistics that just came out of a retreat that the Jewish Agency just finished at the Dead Sea. This incredible growth of private NGOs here, according to the Bank of Israel statistics, the Israeli income into these private NGOs from foreign currency, i.e. contributions from abroad, in 1990 was $357 million. In the year 2000, and there's been really substantial growth since then, it was $1,463 million. So you see, the growth is enormous. Now, in terms of market share, the national organizations here, and by that it's the Jewish Agency, it's JNF, etc., in 1990, their share of this income was $564.7 million to be exact, and in the year 2000, $269.4 million. So it's a 50% decline in market share in one decade. And that obviously has serious implications. North America. And by North America, Canada is, although the United Jewish Communities represents North America, of which on the community level, Canada is a partner. On the fundraising level, Canada is one of the Keren Hayesod countries. So when I speak about financial resources in North America, I'm speaking solely of the U.S. communities. It's a very challenging time, not only because of the growth of nonprofits, not only because of individualism versus the collective, but we're looking at an intermarriage rate, according to the National Jewish Population Study, somewhere between 40% on the low end, 50% on the high end. Also, universalist versus particularist values. What do we mean by that? Much more access to the general society. Symphony orchestras, universities, museums, almost every strata of society in general in the philanthropic world, once upon a time, was very limited to Jewish participation. Now, the Jewish dollar and access, social access, which is exceedingly important to many people, the door is wide open. So for the Jewish person who has philanthropic dollars to give away, whereas before the opportunities were much more narrowly focused within the confines of the Jewish community and or the values or dilemmas that affected the Jewish community, now it's everywhere. Jewish literacy, and I mean Jewish literacy really in all of its forms, is really a very difficult environment. And difficult in what sense? There really is a much lower level, I believe, open to be challenged in the question period, but of Jewish literacy, and I mean that in the broadest sense, whether it's religious, traditional literacy in the religious sense, whether it's civil literacy. There is a growth in day schools in the U.S., but the cost is prohibitively high. It's very, very high. So that there are many, many families, and this is a challenge for the local communities, there are many families that would like to access that as the educational route and the connection for their children, but it's difficult, and there are not always the supportive communal dollars in terms of scholarship money to make that more feasible. There's most definitely a lack of what we call Israel-centered education. There's next to no historical perspective. We've seen it play out on our college campuses. And if a Jewish youngster is not in a day school environment, but goes to Sunday school or Hebrew school a few days a week en route to bar, bat mitzvah, and confirmation, whatever the route is, the dots aren't fully connected because the Israel-oriented education isn't there. This is something, by the way, that's a very serious consequence. It's something that the Education Department of the Jewish Agency is very, very focused on at the moment. The Matzav. This is 3 years and counting where the ability to have direct connections has really been impacted. Birthright attendance aside, and Birthright Israel, and we saw that take a dip, there are really much fewer visits. The fear factor is at work with people not coming and seeing and experiencing for themselves. There is the potential for loss, almost, depending, heaven forbid, on how long this plays out, really almost a loss of a generation. So if you're not making the Israel-centered education on the other side, this is a problem. One of the most popular books in philanthropic circles in the last few years was a book entitled Bowling Alone, which deals with the fact of what used to be friendship circles and Jewish organizations that brought people together, and the analogy to a bowling team, you know, everyone was in a bowling league and they went and it was a group participation. The bowling alone means really that there is a decline in these group activities that coalesced around the Jewish experience, and therefore everybody is coming to the community with their own very specific, if they indeed come to the community, their own point of view. I dealt before with generational differences. It's huge. The younger people in the States today have inherited very strong communities, very strong infrastructure. They have a distrust of large umbrella organizations. They want to touch and feel, and the sort of trust mechanism that one needs to put your dollars into the community, your fate, individual fate, in the hands of the community, and the priorities that the community develops, that trust is really lacking amongst the younger generation. And they have an attitude, maybe everybody would like to think their children are a little different, but the basic attitude is, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of what it is that I'm doing? It's a much less, well, the values, let's say, that brought me into my life's work, into the community, are really kind of floating up in the air at the moment. I happen to believe a loss for everyone, but I'll put that aside again. That's another big debate. And I think the most existential question facing the communities today is, can you create personal connections? Can you appeal to the mega donor who was a lone ranger in business and brings, again, a very individualistic mentality to their philanthropy, to a younger generation that wants personal connections? Can you be both strategic, really tackle the big issues that face us, which requires the kind of scope and outlook that needs us to be global and working together, and maintain a sense of personal connection? And I don't have an answer for it. We can try and wrestle with it together, but that's one of the main issues that we're facing now as a people, not just the North American community, but I believe as a people with huge implications for Israel. The growth of foundations, absolutely huge industry. It's directly linked, obviously, to the huge spurt in wealth accumulation that we've just seen in the past X number of years. Most of these funds are donor advised. If somebody's not familiar with the term, that means the community is essentially a parking garage for the money. It is the donor, i.e. donor advised, that determines how that money will be distributed. So if the donor wants to give the money to save the whales, the Federation gives then, or the community then gives the money to save the whales. So it doesn't necessarily mean, because there's a huge foundation that's part of, let's say, the Cleveland community, that the Cleveland community or the world Jewish community will necessarily benefit from it. The donors themselves, back to the individualism, work primarily, the donors in these foundations work primarily with the grantees. So if I come as an Amuta in Israel or as an NGO in the States, I'm working directly with the head of the foundation. The interface with the community, it's possible that doesn't happen at all. Foundations in the North American community, that's UJC, the organized community, grew from 2,500 in the 80s to now over 7,500 today. The staggering fact, I mean, that's enough growth, but the staggering fact is these foundations, the total of dollars that they have to play with is somewhere between 25 and 30 billion dollars. That's a huge, huge amount of money by any standard. They tend to fund individual projects or very singly focused organizations. They put, and this will play back also, a very high priority on measurement and accountability, appropriately so with any philanthropic dollar, but, and I hope this is objective, there's probably a little subjective that's creeped in here, but there is a tendency, I believe they're prone to seduction, that very good marketing can sometimes really carry the day instead of more serious due diligence, or it becomes the boutique cause of the moment. And again, there can be a real lack of symmetry between the needs of the community and the needs of the worldwide Jewish community and the prism through which these individual donors and their foundations function. The last item in this scan that truly impacts how the community functions is the allocations process. The allocations process means at the end of the day, how much and the direction in which these financial resources are sent out of the community. There's been a fallacy that annual campaigns are in decline. Certainly, the growth of the foundation dollar is huge. Annual campaigns have not been in decline. Last year was relatively flat as a result of the success of the Israel Emergency Campaign. But there's been a growth of more than $100 million, really, since the last decade in annual campaign growth. So while the growth may not have been as much as we would have liked, it's hardly a down trend. But if you were running two graphs simultaneously, you would see that the annual campaign is on not a steep, but a slow but steady rise up. The allocations to overseas, that's not just Israel, but Israel, the rest of the world, the graph is going in the opposite direction. Now, you could be glib and say, the famous saying is, all politics is local. What you see, what you experience every day, obviously you're much more in tune to those needs. The issues in the French community or the Argentinian community or in Israel are not seen and experienced on a daily basis. Therefore, the all politics is local and the local pressure is there. There's always been a tension, and it's not an inappropriate one. It's hard to balance those needs, and we never have more resources than we have needs, so difficult and responsible decisions have to be made. Having said that, as an emotional base for a lot of the dollars coming in, Israel is front and center. But who tends to sit on these allocation committees? And granted, it can vary from community to community, but essentially they're the people whose children go to the JCCs who are in the day schools. Again, it's not exactly a blank slate when it comes to the balance of needs. Now, what is the attitude of the American community to Israel at the moment? The measurement is wide, but not deep. The Israel Emergency Campaign, which was enormously successful in a short period of time, has shown us really how wide it is. But it's not deep. I said it differs by age cohort. That's extremely important. There are a whole group of really the future of the community in the United States whose education of Israel, and here's where a lot of these issues come together, whose education about Israel is via CNN, period, who have viewed Israel, or their view of Israel is only as an occupier. Now, I'm not talking politics, left, right. I'm talking about this is the perception. I spoke about the fact that actually a very small minority have actually visited Israel. So any expectation, they tend